Hey everybody, Brian Zane here, and I am very much looking forward to today's interview with my special guest. He first made waves a decade ago as Justin Gabriel as part of the first season of NXT, and then later the Nexus in WWE. Since then, he has earned global acclaim for his aerial ability in the ring. He is one of the top stars in Ring of Honor, and starting this weekend, he could be one step closer to earning the ROH Pure Championship. He is the Darewolf, PJ Black. PJ, thanks for coming on here.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
I just wanted to point out before we begin, though, I know you've been you've commented on my selection of shirts at ROH shows months ago, so I just wanted to show you one of my favorite T-shirts I'm currently wearing right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank this shirt?
I love it. It's a 10.
Excellent, excellent.
It's a great color too, man. Red and black, you can't beat those colors.
Classic. Now, I just wanted to talk about not only are we living in a pandemic world where bookings have been scarce, but also you live in Los Angeles, where I know there's been a lot of wildfire issues, a lot of smoke in the air, so you can't get in your wingsuit and take to the skies. So I have to ask, are you in hell right now? How are you able to, what are you doing to keep yourself busy these days?
I actually recently took up paragliding, which is super fun. It's a slower sport, not as risky as some of the other stuff that I do, and I love hiking. So so all the gyms are closed too, so there's a ton of hiking sites around LA. So that's just what I do. I like being outdoors. And in Malibu, I can literally hike up the mountain for 2-3 hours with my backpack, and then raise up get my paraglider out and fly all the way down. It's like an hour flight, and I can land right in front of Nobu on Malibu Beach. That has been fantastic, but lately with the fires, the visibility, and obviously the air quality has been terrible. So just been sitting at home, really.
Yeah, well, hiking alone up a mountain for 2 hours is great exercise. It's good cardio for you, I guess.
It's the best.
You are, of course, you're a daredevil, not just in the ring, but also outside of it. Your love of things like skydiving, base jumping, hang gliding, and whatnot. It's very well known. Fast bikes. Is there any kind of wild and crazy stunt that you've not done yet that you wouldn't do?
I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't do. There are some stuff that I'm really scared of, and that's why I do these things, because once you go over that hill of fear, if you will, that's when growth happens. So that's people think I'm just this crazy adrenaline junkie who just wants to for me it's much deeper than that. It's almost like being in the moment, right? It's almost like being Zen, which is the opposite of adrenaline junk. But let me explain this to you. So imagine this. You're standing on top of a building. You got the parachute on. You've checked it. Everything is working. You're looking down. You have the plan, because we plan for weeks for one jump. People think we just go to the building and jump. That's not what happens. There's a lot of planning that goes involved into this. We check the weather at every single level. We check so many things, right? So when you're standing on top of that building and you look down, you don't think of anything. You don't think of some of your favorite matches that you used to have, or bills you have to pay, or your upcoming bookings. You don't think of anything. You're completely present in that moment. And that is, to me, what meditation is. So extreme sports for me is like a meditation.
I didn't know about this, actually. You lost a part of your finger a few years ago in a base jumping accident. It was reattached, so that's nice. Did it cause you to kind of reevaluate that course of action, or kind of make you even think about your future in wrestling?
I did. The doctors actually told me that I'd never wrestle again, and I probably never walk again. So, because I broke both my legs too. So I was in the hospital, and I was like, that's in fact where my life changed completely. That's what put me on this path that I'm on right now. I was sitting in the wheelchair, and I was like, I'm not going to let a doctor tell me what I can and cannot do. So I started searching holistic medicine, alternative healing. That's what got me onto this biohacking life that I lead right now. That's the book I'm writing is on biohacking, actually. I just started researching, reading books, which I never used to do. I read 2-3 books a week now, which has been great during quarantine, because I now have more time to read, because I don't own a television. When they told me I could never wrestle again, I was like, oh man, what am I going to do with my life right now? Because wrestling is all I live for. And but it took me a long time. I was 10 months in this wheelchair. It took me another year to relearn how to walk in a swimming pool first. Then I could walk, then I could run, and then I started jumping. It took me another 2 years to be at the level where I am right now. The finger, the doctor told me that she won't be able to save it, but she did. I don't know how she did that. And I have full function of it now. You can see some crazy scars, and the nail looks all funky. And the nail took 2 years to grow back, actually. But I had to do rehab on this. Like for every day I had to do little repetitions like this. I had to do 100 repetitions on that joint, 100 repetitions on that joint, and stretch it. And now I have full function. So the mind is definitely stronger than the body. So if anyone thinks they cannot do anything, you're wrong.
I know that you recently worked a New Japan taping or a New Japan Strong show in California. You stood across the ring from your old Nexus partner, Fred Rosser, formerly Darren Young. I believe that was the first time, from what I could tell in research, the first time you guys shared a ring since King of Trios a couple of years ago. I know fans really appreciate seeing these kind of old partnerships and old history kind of be rekindled in a different platform years later. What was that like for you?
That was super fun. You know, I'm a big fan of Fred. When we met in FCW, obviously, and, you know, I'm from South Africa, so moving to a different country, I don't have any friends or family here. So, you know, the first people I met, I'm still friends with them, and they're like my family, especially like the Usos and Heath and Wade, guys like that, you know, like they're my family. I didn't have anywhere to go in Thanksgivings or Christmas dinners, and, you know, those guys took me in. So they'll always be family of mine. But if I stand across the ring from them, I'd like to whoop their ass, just like you know, like two brothers, you fight all the time. And it was super fun, man. I mean, I beat the crap out of Fred, but after the match I gave him a hug, I shook his hand, and I was like, let's do it again. You know, it was super fun. It was I can't wait to do it again, actually.
Right, so you're getting back into the swing of things, wrestling. Not only are you working, you know, the New Japan shows in California, you're also part of the ROH Pure Title Tournament, which continues this weekend on ROH TV. What's it been like for you? Because you're used to working in front of big crowds and everything, and now you've been working shows with no spectators. Like, how hard of an adjustment's that been for you?
It was very hard. You know, Ring of Honor didn't do the empty arena shows at first, so I kind of watched what the other companies are doing, and I couldn't even watch it. It was terrible to me because I watch wrestling for the spectacle. I love the music and the pyro and people going crazy, and see why people go crazy, you know. Like, so now it's very different. Like, it's silent in the arena. You have to also change up your style because there's a lot of things you usually do for reaction, and as a performer, you know, a lot of wrestlers focus on choreography. I kind of freestyle it. I kind of feed off the fans' energy, and whatever they respond to, that's what I'm going to build on. And now we don't have that, so I had to completely readjust my style. I think I did a decent job at it. It's still a work in progress. I see most of the guys just keep working like they usually do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I've always been one of those guys who just adapt to my opponent and the situation. So it's been interesting for sure.
Now, you've been wrestling more than half your life. You know, you debuted at a very young age, you know, after being trained by your father. Growing up, was the expectation always there for you to wrestle, or was it something where you took the initiative and you said, like, you wanted to get into this? Like, who was the first person to initiate that conversation about wanting to actually become a wrestler?
That's a great question. I always knew I was going to be a wrestler. When I was 8 years old, I decided. I remember playing the Monday Night Raw game on Sega on the Mega Drive, and I remember sitting on the couch. I remember it, and I looked at my aunt, and I was like, "I'm going to do this full time one day." And she was like, "Yeah, okay, you can do it." You know, she's always been very supportive of my career, unlike the rest of my family. But my dad too. My dad knew that I was going to be a wrestler. His plan for me was to go to the United States, go to Japan. He actually had like a whole plan for me. When I was 18, I was going to go live in Germany for 6 months, go to the dojo in Japan for 6 months. And, you know, we were going to do this whole plan. And then I was going to go back to South Africa, and we were going to start a federation there and take over. My dad, unfortunately, passed away when I was 18. So none of that stuff could happen. I still tried to go to the dojo. I still tried to go to Germany, but none of that stuff happened. I ended up going to England because I went to college in England, which was awesome. I lived there for 5 years. And then like 3 years later, I got signed by WWE. So I wasn't going to turn that down. None of the kids at school knew what I was doing on weekends. I would always get to school on Monday. My homework was never done. I was full of bruises and glitter. And people were like, "What were you doing this weekend?" I was like, you know, I was busy.
Was the glitter part of your gimmick at the time? Like, what was?
No,
what was PJ Black's first look when he first started wrestling? Walk me through that gimmick.
The very first look. So PJ Black was actually born when I was 14 years old. I went through that gothic phase where I painted my room black, and I had this like fluorescent light with purple carpets. And my dad, my real name is Paul Jr. my dad started calling me PJ at a young age because we sounded and looked very similar. And then, yeah, he just one day called me PJ Black when he walked into my room when I was painting it black. So the very first look that I had, I gave the lady two pictures. It was the Crow and Edward Scissorhands. And I was like, can you combine these? Because I was a 16-year-old kid. I was super skinny. And like, you know, back then too, like you had to be a certain height and weight before you can even train wrestling. But, you know, my dad was the boss, so I kind of got in. I think I posted it on my Instagram a couple of weeks ago. So if anyone's interested in that, the PJ450, the very first picture is there somewhere.
I'm going to check that out when we're done with this interview. I had a few viewer questions sent to me. Speaking of your time early on in South Africa. So some people wanted to know, what is the wrestling scene like, or what was it like at least when you started in South Africa compared to, say, the US?
Oh, so not many people know this. In the 80s and early 90s, it was actually an unofficial territory. Remember how people used to move away from territory before Vince monopolized the whole business?
Right.
I used to see guys like Andre the Giant come wrestle our champion, Hulk Hogan. Fit Finn used to come over for like 6 months at a time. Drew McDonald, who's dead now, but he used to come over for like a year at a time. You know, it was like an unofficial territory, or maybe it was an official territory. Who knows? But yeah, it was very different. And everything, and my dad took over from those promoters. And then in 1999, when my dad died, the wrestling kind of just stopped. And everyone expected me to take over the company. I just wanted to be a wrestler, you know, and I didn't know what to do. My dad was my best friend. We had all these plans, and, you know, it just kind of crashed. So I kind of just packed my backpacks one day and just without telling my family, and that's why they're mad too. I just went to Europe and started soul searching, backpacking through Europe. And one day I was like, man, I gotta do something with my life. And that's why I went to college, got my degree and everything. And long story short, I walked into an indie wrestling event because I heard bumping. I walked past this like little stadium, and I was like, man, that sounds like wrestling. And I walked in there, and remind you, at this time I didn't watch any wrestling because I was still heartbroken. I lost my dad, you know, because we were in this business together. We tagged together. We did everything together. He was my best friend. So I didn't want anything to do with wrestling. So I walked into this indie show, and it was AJ Styles wrestling Johnny Storm. And I was just like, my eyes were just like this for like an hour. And the next day I started training again. And it wasn't like riding a bike. I didn't get it back quickly, you know, because I wrestled from 16 to 19, 3 years full-time on the road, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every day for 3 years. And then, yeah, for 2 years, I didn't do anything. And then when I got back into it, it was like starting from scratch almost, but it was definitely worthwhile.
You mentioned in that you know, you were expected to take over the business once your dad died. Like, now that you've been in wrestling for so long, and obviously, you know, this is still kind of looking far ahead, but has the idea of like running a company or booking, has it been appealing to you at all?
Yes, and I did start a company. It's called Slam Force Africa. We just ran one event before all this terrible pandemic stuff happened. I wrestled Rob Van Dam in the first show. It was awesome. We broke the ring. You can actually, if you just Google PJ Black, Rob Van Dam, breaking ring or something, or big botch ring, whatever you want to call it, it's on there. It's amazing. So my plan, I never wanted to run a wrestling promotion, but now South Africa is such a huge market, and I feel like the fans there deserve it. I get so many emails from kids daily, like wanting to know how I did it and how I broke into the business, you know? So I definitely want to start some wrestling schools back in South Africa and all the big cities, and, you know, pave the way for the younger generation. You know, like I had a very tough road. That's one of the reasons my mom said I'll never make it as a wrestler, because she's like, no one from South Africa has ever make it. And I was like, great, then I'll be the first. Because that was always my mentality. You know, like a lot of people think like, no one's ever done it, so there's no way you can do it. I'm like, no, perfect, then I'll be the first. And I was, and you know, it was awesome. And now I just want to pave the way forward for the younger generation. I want to teach them everything I've learned around the world.
Let's go back to 2010. You were part of that original crop of NXT wrestlers, just a group of guys from FCW looking to make a name for themselves. And when you were there, NXT started out kind of like a game show. It was like a competition, not so much on the wrestling aspect. And now 10 years later, it's completely different. It's its own brand. And in many ways, some people would say it's kind of WWE's answer to companies like Ring of Honor. So what is your take on the evolution for NXT? And like, what do you think of those comparisons?
I mean, I think it's great. I mean, I like the evolution of wrestling. You know, you'll see some people and companies kind of go a certain way, and some people go a different way, and some go backwards. One of my best coaches I've ever had, Dr. Tom Pritchett, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who that is. He always used to say, what's old is new and what's new is old. So I always used to like watch the really old stuff and borrow from those characters, borrow moves, spots, you know, whatever it was. I love the evolution of wrestling. I love the way that Triple H has turned NXT into its own separate brand. It's not even a developmental territory anymore. I love that. I really do. It's incredible. And it's come such a long way in such a short time. It's complete. It's not a developmental territory anymore. It's its own brand. But I feel like 10 years ago when we did the Nexus thing, that was super unique at the time. And I feel like till today, that's why people still talk about it.
It was very unique. I mean, I maintain to this day that one of my top favorite moments in the last decade in wrestling was the Nexus debut, just for how different it felt. When did you know that the Nexus was going to be a thing? In relation to like when the NXT season was happening, and like what was it like to go out there and execute that really big debut?
It was awesome. We didn't know what to expect, obviously, but we just did what we thought was right at the time, and it didn't really sink in how big it was going to be until a couple of weeks later. Until we used to walk to the ring just before Raw went live on the air. We used to walk to the ring, and the buzz in that arena, like, look, I get goosebumps. It was awesome just feeling that, and I was like, okay, cool. We're doing something cool right here.
I'm just gonna put it out there. SummerSlam 2010, Team Nexus, Team WWE. What the hell happened?
Who knows? We should have, we should have handled that a lot different. We were still new kids at that time, walking on eggshells. And I mean, we knew the direction it should have gone in, and we tried to change that, but someone else had a little bit more power than us. And, until this day, he knows that he kind of messed up and he said sorry. But it's in the history books. There's nothing we can do about it now.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you still main evented one of the biggest annual shows of the year, so it's nothing to sneeze at. Sean Ross I'm sorry, I already botched his name here. He's going to give me hell for it on Twitter. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com, he told me to ask you what your awesome idea was for the Adam Rose bunny.
Oh, okay. So I've told this a few times, but let me see if I can remember. It's been a while. So I wanted this bunny to be kind of like, and before I say anything, this idea would not work in the PG era. If this was the Attitude era, this would have worked. So imagine this. The bunny starts doing matches. He starts like losing matches. He starts drinking. He starts smoking. They cut away. He's like sitting backstage and there's like dried blood on his fur. He's like smoking a cigar. He's just like, man, what I got to do? I got to fight this guy. And like he turns into this hardcore Donnie Darko bunny. He just like starts slashing people and hitting people with chairs and ladders. And he does like, eventually wins the hardcore championship that we were going to bring back. That was the idea. And he was going to go through all this stuff, go through tables, because I could have padded the bunny suit up and do like crazy stunts, man, like stuff that no one's ever seen before. And then the idea was, think about this, like if because everyone wants to see who it is, right? The reveal. So if it was anybody else, there was some talks of it being Kurt Angle, Jeff Hardy, like there was a bunch of talks, and I don't think any of those would have made sense. I was like, yo, what if I do all this crazy stuff and maybe there's a backstage segment where the bunny gets knocked out and maybe they throw up the X, make people think it's real, and then they have to take off the bunny suit and then it's Vince. Wouldn't that's the only explanation that people would be like, oh yeah, that was cool. Because if it was anyone else, they'd be like, oh wow, it was Kurt Angle, or oh, whatever it was, or oh, it was PJ, or whatever it was. Like, and then Vince kind of loved it, and he's like, why would I do that? And I was like, because you're a crazy billionaire. Why? You can do anything you want.
Why wouldn't he do it?
Exactly.
I love that idea though. Just if it be kind of like a bitter, broken down bunny getting into the hardcore. Right. That's awesome. Now, changing gears a bit, we're going to move to kind of the present day. Before the pandemic, I was really enjoying the work that you and Brian Johnson were doing as a team, the Mecca. It was a very unlikely thing. You were kind of the mentor, and he was the really unwilling, the protege in that dynamic. What was it like to work with Brian in that time?
It was awesome, man. And even the stuff that we're doing now, it's still ongoing. I've been wrestling for 23 years. So I feel like I want to teach these kids in South Africa. I feel like I have a lot to teach the younger generation, you know. And I saw Silas take on Josh Woods under his wing, become like a mentor to him. And I was like, I can do that. And, you know, it also opens up a lot of stories for us to battle them. And, you know, I'm good friends with both of them, but I love to punch them in the face, like more than anything. And Brian's the same. Like Brian Johnson I love him. He has some issues. He, you know, is angry all the time, but that just makes it so much more rewarding for me when I teach him something. Like I taught him how to meditate. I taught him how to do breathing exercises. I taught him a few new things in the ring. I taught him his new finishing move. And, you know, to actually see him use these things and utilize these techniques, it's actually very, very, it's very cool for me to see that.
As I mentioned earlier, you are part of the Pure Title Tournament, and your match with Tony Deppen airs this weekend on TV. Now, first off, you are wrestling a match with a specific set of rules. It's different than your traditional matchup. You were talking about how the lack of crowd kind of forced you to change your style up. What else about like just the constraints of a pure match? Like how else would that impact your style?
Well, it's a completely different style, right? So first of all, there's no punches in the face. You have 3 rope breaks, which I think is a fascinating rule because, you know, someone who has a ton of submission holds, they would easily win any match because you can just apply hold after hold after hold. You only have 3 rope breaks. The 4th one, there's no break. And many people don't know this, but I'm actually an excellent technical wrestler. I have so many moves in my back pocket that I've never even showed anybody. And now in this tournament, I can actually do it. I can actually wrestle the style that I grew up watching.
Yeah, I think it's cool that, you know, your opponent is Tony Deppen, and guys like him and Fred Yehi and Wheeler Yuta and Russ Taylor, these unsigned guys getting these opportunities. I think it's one of the really cool things about this tournament. Besides those guys, is there anybody who's currently unsigned in the wrestling world who's kind of caught your eye as of late, someone you think would be a good fit in ROH?
Wow, there's so many. The talent on the independent circuit is ridiculous right now. And, you know, I didn't know too much about Tony Deppen before, and I tried to search him, and I couldn't find anything. But he's in this tournament, so I know he's good, you know. So, and there's so many young up-and-coming talents that deserve spots. And, you know, some of us have to fight really hard for our spots because these guys want to take our spots. And it's great. I love that. See, I love the evolution of wrestling. And wrestling just keeps on evolving. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Now, we're going to wrap this up with a couple more viewer questions. First of all, what sort of dream matchups do you have in ROH right now? Like, what's left on your plate of dream matchups?
Oh, wow. I've wrestled pretty much everyone. I haven't wrestled Dragon Lee in a singles match yet. So that's one for sure. Shane Taylor, I definitely want to wrestle him. Never even touched. Who else? That was one of the deciding factors because I had different options of companies to go to, but I was looking at the Ring of Honor roster one day and I was like, yeah, I can have good matches with all of these guys. And that was one of there was 5 reasons, but that was one of the main reasons I signed. And I cannot wait to go through the roster. Win or lose, I think we'll see some magic matches.
Absolutely. Now this one surprised me how many people asked this question when I posted on social media I was going to be talking to you. I guess apparently this very important question is, how do you keep your beard and your mustache looking so nice? Talk to me, what kind of product do you use?
I'm getting a little bit older. Can you see all the gray now?
It's a good look for you.
Yeah. I mean, it looks really cool. Like chicks dig it. Like girls love it. It just sometimes on camera it doesn't look too good because maybe it's the lights, maybe the gray reflects off the lights. So I put a little bit of beard dye in here sometimes. And this is just probably a lot of food in here, honey. I use a lot of honey and coconut oil.
I go through the same thing. I'm still kind of dealing with that as well. I'm still getting used to the whole beard life, but I don't think it's going to last much longer here.
Do you know why I grew this beard?
Why?
So let me see. I can't remember the date, but I know it was Thanksgiving 2010. And we had 3 days off and I didn't shave. And I was like, beard. And we were in Jacksonville, Florida. And I remember going to the Gold's Gym and running into Vince. And he was like, wow, you look so different. He's like, you don't look like a kid anymore. Because, I mean, everyone knows what I look like without a beard, right? I look like a freaking child. He's like, you don't look like a kid anymore. You look like a kid with a beard. So since that day I just started growing it, and that was 10 years ago. And I shaved once for a Halloween costume, and that was it.
The irony is this beard is for a Halloween costume. That's why I go in mine.
Oh, what are you going as?
It's a secret. Everyone's going to find out here on the channel soon enough. But
I can't wait to see it.
thank you. I'll tell you when we're off air. But thank you so much for this interview here. It's really cool to hear from you. It's been a while to catch up on everything. Before we go, what stuff do you want to plug in terms of social media and whatnot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the stuff that we talked about, like the old school PJ Black photos, all my paragliding and skydiving stuff, and some of the new moves I've been working on will be on my Instagram, PJ450. But all my links to my social media and links to my YouTube channel, I haven't posted on there in a long time, but I will, is on my website, pjblack.com.
All right. Well, PJ, thanks so much for taking part in this interview. Good luck this weekend in your match in the ROH Pure Title Tournament. For PJ Black, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.